A piece of land can look just fine from the road, and a Quonset hut can look just fine from the listing photo. I have seen it happen out here. Good people, serious people, people who did their research on the steel and the insulation and the kit manufacturer walk around the outside, like what they see, and sign the papers before they ever ask the one question that would have saved them everything, who never once stopped to ask whether they had a legal right to cross the ground between the public road and their front door, or who never came back in April to see what the site looked like when the snow was leaving. They found out the answer to both questions after they had already paid. By then there was nothing to do but learn the lesson the expensive way. Today I am going to teach you how to look at a Quonset build the way an experienced Alaskan hand looks at one before ever making an offer. There are 6 things to check. Just 6. And if you learn them, you can walk a site or sit at your kitchen table and look at it on the maps and the listing photographs and tell in about a minute whether what you're looking at is a solid shelter or a steel trap. My name is Elias Yoder. I farm in Lancaster County, and I know ground. But I have spent enough time in the north, and I have talked to enough people who live and build up here to know that Alaska ground asks harder questions than most, and that a Quonset on bad ground or a bad site is one of the more expensive mistakes a person can make in this life. The 6 checks I'm going to walk you through today are the same questions any sensible old-timer up here would ask before he ever put his name on anything. Some of them you can run from your kitchen before you make the drive. All of them are worth knowing. Stay with me. By the end of this, you will not be a person who can be sold a bad build. The first thing before the steel, before the insulation, before anything else you can see above the ground, is what sits beneath it. A Quonset hut is only as solid as its foundation, and in Alaska, the foundation question is not the same question it is in the lower 48. Down there, you worry about soil drainage and bearing capacity. Up here, you worry about all that, and then you worry about permafrost, and permafrost changes everything. Permafrost is ground that stays frozen year-round, not just through the winter, but through the summer, and the year after that, and the decade after that. It has been frozen in some places for thousands of years. And when it is frozen solid, it is a perfectly good thing to build on. The problem comes when it thaws. When the ice in the ground melts, the soil above it sinks, and it does not sink evenly. One corner goes down, another stays up, and whatever is sitting on top of that ground gets pulled in 2 directions at once. On a house, that means cracked walls and sticking doors. On a Quonset, where the whole structure is a continuous arch of connected steel panels, it means the arches rack. The frame twists. Panels that were designed to carry load straight down the curve are now carrying it sideways, and steel that was built for one kind of stress fails under another. The check here is simple, and it costs you nothing but time. Walk to the base of the building and crouch down. Look along the bottom edge of the arches from one end of the building to the other. That line should be level and consistent. If one side has lifted, if the base plate on one arch is sitting higher than the one beside it, if you can see daylight under a corner that should be sitting flat on its pad, the ground is already moved. That movement has already happened. It will keep happening. The soils that cause this trouble most often are the ones that look the most innocent. Heavy clay that holds water and will not let it pass. Muskeg, which is a dark, wet, spongy ground you find in low areas all over Alaska, ground that is essentially a sponge sitting on top of frozen earth. Both of these hold moisture against the foundation through the winter. Both of them are subject to frost heave, which is what happens when that water freezes, expands, and pushes upward against whatever is sitting on top of it. The cruel part, the part that catches people who are not watching for it, is that heavy clay and solid ground can look exactly alike in August. The grass is green. The ground feels firm underfoot. You would not know the difference standing there on a dry afternoon. But the frost will know the difference come November, and by spring you will see it in the building. A proper foundation for a Quonset in this country is either a concrete slab poured over a deep gravel pad that holds water away from the base, or timber skids or concrete piers set below the frost line where the heave cannot reach them. When you're looking at a build, you want to see evidence of that thinking. A thick gravel apron around the perimeter, piers that go deep, a slab that is not cracked, not tilted, not showing the spiderweb lines that mean it has been stressed from below. If the slab is cracked, if the base is visibly uneven when you sight down the length of the building, If the arches look twisted when you stand at one end and look toward the other, the ground has already done its work. You are not looking at a problem that is coming. You are looking at a problem that is already here and will only get worse. The rule is plain. If the foundation has moved, walk away. There is no repair for ground that is actively shifting beneath a building. You will be buying someone else's losing fight. The second thing is the steel itself, and specifically what the snow has already told you about it. Alaska's snow is not the same as lower 48 snow. It is heavier. It is wetter, especially in the coastal regions and in the transition zones where maritime air meets interior cold. It packs hard. It sits on a roof for months at a time, and it does not give the building a rest between storms the way snow does in places where it melts off between events. The load that a roof carries up here over the course of a winter is a serious number, and a Quonset kit that was designed and rated for conditions in Ohio or Kansas is not built for that number. This matters because a great many Quonset kits are sold nationwide without regional engineering. The manufacturer rates them for a standard snow load, which is fine for most of the country and genuinely dangerous for parts of Alaska. When a roof carries more load than the steel was designed for, the steel yields. It does not snap, not at first. It dimples. Small flat spots appear in the panels where the curve has been pressed inward. The arch, which gets its strength precisely from being a continuous curve, has now lost that geometry in those spots. A dimpled panel is a weakened panel, and the load it was carrying does not go away. It redistributes to the panels beside it, which are now carrying more than they were designed for. The process continues. Step back from the building and look at the roof line from the end. The arch should be a clean, unbroken curve from the base on one side to the base on the other. If it looks flat at the top, if the peak seems lower than the geometry of the arch would suggest, the structure has been overloaded. Look along the surface of the panels for a dimpling, for the slight inward dents that catch the light differently than the surrounding metal. Look at the end walls, the flat vertical faces at each end of the building. A roof that is trying to flatten under load pushes outward on those walls. If the end walls are bowing, the whole frame is under stress that it was not designed to carry. Look at the fasteners. Every panel is connected to the one beside it with bolts or screws, and those connections are where water gets in when the seals fail. Rust streaks running down from fastener points tell you water has been sitting there, that the fastener itself is corroding, and that the connection is losing the strength it was installed with. A Quonset with rust streaks at every panel joint is a building whose connections are quietly failing. Ask for the documentation. Any legitimate kit sale comes with a spec sheet that states the design snow load the building was rated for. Find out what the ground snow load requirement is for the specific location you are looking at, because in Alaska, that number varies enormously from one region to the next, and it matters. If the seller cannot produce the spec sheet, or if the rated load is lower than the local requirement, you are looking at a building that was undersized for its site from the day it was put up. The rule is this: a Quonset that is already dimpled or sagged has been permanently weakened. Steel that has yielded does not recover its original strength when the load is removed. You cannot press the dimple back out and have the same panel you started with. The damage is done, and it is structural. Walk away from a sagging roof the same way you would walk away from a cracked foundation. The building has already told you what it thinks of its own situation. The third thing is insulation, and this is a check that separates the people who understand what a steel building is from the people who are still looking at it the way they would look at a wood frame house. A Quonset hut is, at its core, a continuous surface of steel. Steel conducts heat and cold with almost no resistance. It does not slow the passage of temperature the way wood does, the way concrete does, certainly not the way insulation does. Without a proper thermal break between the steel and the interior air, the building will be as cold inside as is outside, or close enough to it that the difference will not save you. The thermal break is a layer of insulation that interrupts that conduction. In a properly built Quonset in Alaska, that layer is closed-cell spray foam applied directly to the interior surface of the steel. Closed-cell foam does two things at once. It insulates and it seals. It fills every gap, every curve, every fastener penetration, so that cold air cannot find a path through. It also stops the condensation problem, which is the other thing that bare steel does in a cold climate. When warm interior air touches a cold steel surface, the moisture in that air condenses on the metal. In winter, that condensation freezes. Ice builds on the inside of your own roof, and when the building warms up, it drips. A building that drips on you from the ceiling is a building that is rotting from the inside, and no amount of heating will fix the underlying problem. Look at the interior surface of the building. What covers the steel? Closed cell spray foam has a hard, slightly uneven surface, usually cream or yellow, and it covers everything uniformly. Rigid foam board, cut and fitted to the curve of the arch, is an acceptable second option. Fiberglass bats draped or stapled to the curve are nearly useless in this application because they do not seal, they do not stop condensation, and they cannot follow the geometry of the arch without leaving gaps. Bare metal on any interior surface is not a minor deficiency. It is a fundamental failure of the building as a shelter. Look at the floor. Is there insulation under the slab, or was the concrete poured directly on the native ground? An uninsulated slab in permafrost country is a cold sink that pulls heat out of the building to the floor continuously. No stove, no heating system, no amount of fuel will fully overcome a floor that is in direct thermal contact with frozen ground. The insulation under the slab is invisible once the concrete is poured, so you have to ask, and you have to get an honest answer. And if the answer is that the builder did not bother, you need to know what that costs you every month in fuel before you decide whether the price of the building makes sense. The rule here is simple. If you see bare steel, if you see drip stains running down the interior walls, if you see frost on the surface of the metal in cold weather, or fiberglass hanging loose from the ceiling where it is pulled away from the curve, that building is not winterized. It can be made winterized, but the cost of spraying the interior of a Quonset properly is real money, and that cost belongs in your offer, not in your first winter's budget as a surprise. The fourth thing is access and site placement, and this is where more people go wrong than any other single check, because it is the question that seems too simple to ask. Of course you can get there. You drove there today, didn't you? Yes, in August, on a dry road, in a truck. Come back in April. Access to a Quonset in Alaska has two parts, exactly the way access to any rural land has two parts, and most people only check one. The first part is physical access. Can you drive to this building in every season? Not just in summer when the roads are firm and the ground is frozen solid or bone dry. In breakup, when the frost is coming out of the road surface and a loaded truck will sink to the axles in what looked like solid gravel 2 weeks ago. In the deep cold of January, when drifting snow can close a road faster than anyone can plow it. A building you can reach in August, but not in January, is not a shelter. It is a summer storage unit with a very expensive price tag. Look at the road that serves the site. Is it a maintained road? And if so, who maintains it? A state or borough road gets plowed. A private road that the seller has been maintaining himself gets plowed when he feels like it, or when it's fuel for the equipment, or not at all once you have bought the property and he no longer has a reason. Find out before you sign, not after. The second part is legal access, and this is the part that traps people who think they have done their homework. A building can sit on a parcel of land that has no deeded easement connecting it to the public road. The road you drove in on may cross someone else's ground. The seller may have had a neighborly arrangement for over 20 years, a handshake and a wave, and nobody ever made a fuss about it. That handshake is worth nothing once the seller is gone. The neighbor sells, or the neighbor dies and the heirs sell, and the new owner puts up a gate, and you cannot reach your own building. That is not a hypothetical. That is a thing that happens, and it happens to careful people who simply did not know to ask. Look at the deed. Does it describe a deeded easement, a recorded right-of-way, a legal path from the public road to the parcel? If it does not, and if the building is set back from the road with other ground between it and the pavement, you need to find out how you are legally permitted to cross that ground before you pay for what sits on the other side of it. Now look at the site itself, the ground the building sits on and the ground around it. Where does the water go when the snow melts? Stand at the building and look uphill. If the land rises behind the building and drains toward it, every spring melt event sends water toward your foundation. A Quonset sitting at the bottom of a bowl collects snow melt from the surrounding slope, rain from summer storms, and ground seep from the thawing soil above it. The building sits in all of it, The gravel pad saturates. The foundation is now sitting in standing water for 6 weeks every spring. And what frosty begins, standing water continues. Look at where the doors face. A Quonset has large end wall openings. And those openings are where the building breathes and where the heat leaves every time you open them. Doors facing directly into prevailing wind bleed heat every time they open and let wind load press against the end wall every hour they are closed. In a country where wind and cold come from a consistent direction most of the winter, door orientation is not a small thing. It is a heating build decision. The rule is this: no legal access is a deal killer. Full stop. A building you cannot reach legally is a building you do not own in any meaningful sense, no matter what the deed says about the parcel itself. And a building sitting in a drainage bowl, with its doors facing the wind, is a building that will fight you every single day you try to live in it. These are not things to negotiate around. They are things to walk away from. The fifth thing requires you to look away from the building entirely and look at the forest around it. I call this the drunken tree survey. When permafrost thaws or the soil is inherently unstable, the ground shifts underneath the root systems of the trees. Healthy trees grow straight up toward the light, but if the soil beneath them is actively moving and losing its structural integrity, the trees tip. They lean at wild, chaotic angles, looking like a crowd of drunks try to stand up straight in a gale. If the black spruce or birches surrounding the clearing look like they are tilting in 3 different directions, the ground on that entire parcel is on the move. The forest is giving you a warning that the seller never will. If the trees can't find solid footing, your metal arch building won't find it either. The 6th and final check is the one you run before you ever start your truck. You need to look at the wider environmental view using topographic and historical maps. Pull up the satellite imagery and USGS maps right from your kitchen table. Look at where that parcel sits in the broader landscape. Is it at the base of an avalanche chute? Is it sitting in an old river oxbow that fills up during a 100-year flood event? A building can look perfect on its immediate 5 acres, but if those 5 acres sit in the path of a natural drainage corridor for the whole valley, nature will eventually reclaim it. Don't just look at the dirt under the structure. Look at the entire watershed. When you have checked all 6 things, you will know something important. You will know whether what you are looking at is a building that was put in the right place by someone who understood the ground, the snow, the cold, and the seasons, or whether it was put up fast by someone who liked the view and figured the rest would work itself out. The 6 checks are the foundation and the ground beneath it, the snow load integrity of the steel, the thermal break and the insulation, the access and the site placement, the drunken tree survey of the surrounding land, and the wider environmental view from the maps. Run to them in that order, and you will catch the things that ruin a build before they ruin you. The seller will show you the building on the best day of the year. The listing photographs were taken from the one angle where the light is good, and the problems are behind the camera. Nobody puts a note in the listing saying the ground shifts in spring, or the roof has already taken more snow than it was rated for, or the road turns to soup in April and stays that way for 6 weeks. Those things you have to find for yourself by knowing what to look for. This is old knowledge. People who built in hard country knew to walk a site after the thaw, to look at the trees around a clearing before they trusted the ground beneath it, to ask the old-timer down the road what the place was like in winter before they signed anything. The modern world has given us maps and satellite pictures and listing databases that let you run the first checks from your kitchen table, and that is a genuine blessing. Use them. But use them the way a careful person uses any tool, to save yourself the trip to the bad sites so that when you do make the drive, you are going somewhere worth going. The good build will still be there after you have done your homework, and the bad one will still be bad after you have signed the papers. Make sure you know which one you are standing in front of before you put your name on anything. Tell me in the comments, are you looking at Quonset for your homestead, or have you already bought one and learned something the hard way? The stories you share teach the next person more than I ever could on my own. Next time, since you now know how to spot a bad build, I'm going to show you how to figure out what a good Alaska homestead property is actually worth, so you do not overpay for a solid piece of ground either. Knowing how to spot the problems is one half of the work. Knowing what the right price is for a good one is the other. Subscribe so you do not miss it. Until then, walk the site, check the 6, and never sign in a hurry. The people who built and survived in this country knew things we are only just starting to remember.